Okay, so that was such a great interview. I'm so inspired by my colleague and friend, Mr. Carson. He's just wonderful. So I'm glad we were able to offer a little tidbit um, to our listeners. So the way that our podcast goes is we start with this interview of a person who's doing great things um, as kind of a role model, and then we end with some tips. And um, so we have some tips that we want to share with you on collaboration. And so I'll just jump in and share them. So the purpose of the tips is for them to be very, very simple, adaptable. They don't have a lot of barriers to entry.
Yeah, and as Estelle said, I just want to, like what Estelle said, our tips, and a lot of these are in our book, as you all know. That's up there, book on high education careers. And as Estelle said, these tips are meant to be no cost, effective, and something you can implement right away. So we didn't want to develop tips where, oh my goodness, I need to have come up with $10,000 to implement these strategies. So, yeah.
I need to have a, very sophisticated skill set in this area.
Mhm.
Um, So we've been talking about students first. And so the first tip is to harness your students as collaborators in the classroom. So one thing that I didn't have a clear understanding of when I was a faculty member, and I never really got it down, was I focused all of my attention on developing the lecture and thinking of, interesting examples, um, ways of making, what was in the textbook clear and so forth. And I'd run right up to the time of the class period and preparing my lecture. And that was all I had time to prepare. Um, and I had heard about this thing of active and collaborative learning, but I never really um, got the gist of it. But the notion is you're not abandoning the lecture, but what you're doing is just reducing its prominence and allowing in the second thing, which is making sure, structuring your class period so that students um, are able to engage with each other and engage with you around the material. And the person that I really found to be the most masterful at this particular strategy is Yvette Myrick. I was kind of like Salieri when I walk into her classroom and I'd see she didn't seem to be making any, it was not difficult for her. She wasn't making any effort at all. And yet the classroom would just go go through, and they were doing topics that you didn't necessarily think were super interesting, but she could get her students to engage. So active and collaborative learning is just essential, but you have to put it inside your planning and your preparation for the classroom, and then you have to put it inside the classroom itself. Second tip that I wanted to share was to um, create a structure for collaboration between your students and yourselves by setting expectations. And so thinking about, before you, as a faculty member, before you enter the classroom for the first time, what are your non-negotiable expectations in the classroom? And then based on that, only picking a few, because anything that you set as an expectation, you need to enforce. And the expectation is what you want them to do. It's a positive expectation rather than what you don't want them to do. So setting clear, consistent, and high expectations is the environment in which students are most likely to collaborate with you. And the third, and probably the last tip that we have time to share with today, is near and dear to our hearts, it's collaborating over the early alert system. And indeed, that's actually where Yvette and I met each other. So I was a faculty member and she was a retention coordinator. And she had just implemented, at the time, very unusual, a college to have early alert. Yvette brought early alert to Morgan, and I heard about this. It sounded like a great idea because you could catch students early and make sure they have the guidance and the resources that they need to either redouble or redirect their efforts to be successful by the end of the semester. So I went to meet with Yvette about just this one student. But what happened very quickly is we thought about, oh, how do we want this to benefit all students? How can we work together in a more coordinated fashion so that it benefits more students? And in collaborating on this one area, that's what launched our 15-year collaboration on a wide range of areas. So the actual activity is quite broad, but the topic is always the same. It's always student success. So that is, well,
And
I think I
actually,
can
thank
the
you.
one more. I have time for one more. So
Sure. If you want, you can do two, and we can make adjustments along the way. You can do both the other two.
okay,
But I was just going to mention real quickly about the early alert system, and thank you. A great tip. I actually wish I could take credit for it, but they had it at Morgan. I sort of bought it on a larger scale, and actually had a chance to present, and this is 15 years later, 15 years ago, about the early alert in England and had a chance to talk about that. The early alert system was fairly new, as Estelle pointed out, 15 something years ago. And I'm so proud now, a lot of colleges, the college where I'm currently at and other colleges have an early alert system. But 15 years ago, a lot of places weren't doing early alert. They would wait until midterm or mid-semester to inform a student how they were doing, if they weren't passing, and sometimes that's too late if you're halfway through the semester for a student to find out, wow, I'm not passing this class. So proud to actually elevate early alert and share with other people internationally. So really proud of that, that just about so many colleges now have early alert, but 15 years ago, they weren't doing it on that scale. So thank you. Yeah, but we have time to do the two other ones if you want to real quickly.
okay, yeah. So these won't take as long, but
Mm.
so another really powerful way of collaboration is to think about what are the major initiatives in your institution that are the ones that are important to the president, important to the top administration, um, and to think about, of all of these initiatives, which one touches your heart, and then join that one. And what happens is you get introduced by joining that initiative. You get introduced to like-minded people from across the institution who are who are going to be inspiring, who are going to be everyone's pulling their weight because they are really inspired by the initiative. And it's a way to keep yourself inspired at the end of the day. So it's a beneficent circle. Um, so that's one thing that has been very inspiring in my life every time I've participated in that kind of institution-wide initiative. And then the final tip that we have is to think about kind of collaborating with the institution as a whole, not necessarily a specific person, but to think about what is the institution's mission and values, and how can I incorporate the aspects of the mission and values that are so meaningful to me into my classroom, or if I'm in student affairs, into my activities as a student affairs professional. Because if I'm every day reminded about the institution's mission and what I really admire about it and find meaningful, and that is part and parcel of what I do every day, that's a way of infusing each and every day, reminding yourself of your passion and your purpose for higher education, and as it's connected to the institution you're currently working at. So those are the 5 tips, and we're really happy to share those with you.